If you're shopping for a compact SUV in America, you've probably noticed that one of these things is not like the other, and that would be the 2025 Mitsubishi Outlander. Not because of the available plug-in hybrid system, but because every Outlander, including that plug-in hybrid, is going to seat 7. Yep, this is the only compact SUV left with 3 rows of seating. Once upon a time, that was a much more common option, but now, if you want 3 rows, well, admittedly a very tiny third row, then you want the Mitsubishi Outlander. And with it comes a pretty small price tag. This starts at $31,590, including destination. That is notably less than a Kia Sorento at $33,405, in some ways the closest competitor to this particular model, and significantly less than a Toyota Highlander at $40,000. But remember, this is still a compact SUV, so in reality, it competes more with the RAV4 or a CR-V than something like that Highlander. For 2025, the Outlander gets an interior refresh with bigger screens than before, a slightly bolder exterior. The tweaks here are a bit more subtle, so I forgive you if you don't notice them right away, but we get a redesigned grille, and we have full LEDs all the way around. So LED headlights, LED fog lights, LED DRLs and turn signals, and then full LED tail lights in the back. But the design and the structure of this is the same as before. So it's still closely related to the Nissan Rogue, and the big difference is that this is a little bit boxier in the back, so it can accommodate that third row in the United States, and again, we have that optional plug-in hybrid system under the hood, which has not changed for 2025. So if you want to know about the Outlander plug-in hybrid, be sure and check out our full review on that. We actually bought an Outlander plug-in hybrid and had it for a year. We do buy our long-term vehicles here for testing, and we did put our own money on the line and tested an Outlander plug-in hybrid. For full thoughts on that one, again, check out that video, but we are going to touch on that in the drive section. I just got back from a month in Bogota, Colombia, where the Outlander is advertised by rental car agencies as a full-size SUV. So I definitely understand that American classifications aren't the same as classifications around the world. But for this market, this is certainly on the small side for something that seats 7. From tip to tail, this is 185.8 inches long, meaning it's about the same exterior dimension, excluding the roof height, as a Mazda CX-50, and only 1 inch longer than a Honda CR-V. So where does the third row come from? Well, mostly it comes from the cargo area in the back. You'll notice that we have a roofline that stays pretty horizontal and a slightly more upright design to the rear. I think that's actually more attractive than the really sloping rear ends that we find in some of the competition, but that's how they carve out that extra space for the third row. Versus something like a Kia Sorento, this has significantly less room on the inside, even though that Sorento is only 3 inches longer. And the big difference just seems to be the way that everything is packaged on the inside. We get slightly shorter overhangs in the Sorento, really no bumper overhang in the back, and a much more upright seating position in that vehicle. Remember, this was designed to accommodate the Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid system right from the factory. But this is certainly a lot easier to park than a Toyota Highlander. 2025 brings us some new wheel designs, but you're only going to find the 255 with tires on the top trims. That certainly has an impact on handling. Ground clearance, that remains the same as before, just over 8 inches in every trim, including that plug-in hybrid. The relatively upright roofline is really obvious from the back, and it's accentuated by this spoiler on top that houses the third brake light. I kind of wish they'd tucked the windshield wiper up there. It would have cleaned off the look a bit, but I do appreciate the fact that we get these full LED taillights in every trim, and we have amber turn signals. The exhaust tips, they're hidden up underneath the bumper, but we do have these sort of, I guess, homage to a fake bumper exhaust there. If we open up the hatch, it opens nice and wide, but you'll notice that we do get this sort of raked rear window, which I kind of wish was a bit more flat and wagon-esque, because that would have improved the cargo practicality. While we're back here, we should talk cargo space. I was able to squeeze 6 24-inch roller bags back here because even though we have slightly less cargo capacity total than in something like a RAV4, this one has 30.6 cubic feet back here, the floor space is actually quite similar, and it's relatively square. The limitation happens up here, where you don't find quite as much room behind the second row seat back and the cargo area in the rear. There's an advantage, though, that we'll talk about when we get to the back seats. So 30.6 cubic feet behind the second row, but if you pull out this roller-style cargo cover, which kind of gets caught up in the seat belts all the time, and fold the third row seats back, we have to tilt those second row seats a little bit forward to do that, then we find a almost ridiculously small cargo area in the back. And you'll notice that we don't have any head restraints there. Those are tucked up here because they don't really have anywhere to go. And they are insanely large due to the size of this third row seat. Just check out how tall that headrest is. It's almost ridiculous. So those pop in right like that. And then you would get 10.9 cubic feet of storage space right here behind the third row. That's enough room to put, you know, maybe two 22-inch roller bags. These are the largest ones you can carry onto a domestic flight. If you have a foldable or soft-sided 24-inch roller bag, you can fit one back here, but it's a real tight squeeze. With the third row folded, you can lift up this panel and then tilt the third row forward. This does not move in the same manner that the third row moved in the plug-in hybrid that we had because it doesn't need to. Here we have room for a spare tire. If you wanted to put one in here yourself, a compact would fit there, but by default we just have a can of Fix-A-Flat in the tire iron kit and a little bit of additional storage space. I kind of wish the third row was removable, however, because bearing in mind that it's an emergency use third row, not a daily use third row, if it was removable, you could reclaim, by my calculations, nearly 10 cubic feet of additional storage space, which would put this at the head of the pack behind the second row. Now, the second row does slide forward and backward, so you can expand the cargo area out even further, and that's actually possible because, as we're going to see in a moment, we have a pretty big second row. But before we get to the hilarity that is the seats, we should talk about this roller-style cargo cover. Mitsubishi does give you a place to put it when it's not behind the second row, but this is not the most convenient because to do it, you have to tilt the third row there. Then you can latch or unlatch it. And when it is in that position, the third row seats have to be all the way up because they do have some recline to make them a bit more comfortable. You can't recline them though with that roller cover in position. You can, however, just sort of toss it in here at a funky angle and still recline the seats. Now let's check out this third row. The second row seats tilt and slide forward like that, which means obviously you cannot leave a child seat latch anchored into position and still get back here into the way back. Something that I would appreciate because my daughter is still in a rear-facing child seat, but maybe one day she'll be in a forward-facing seat, so that would actually be helpful. You know, back here in the third row, let's be honest, it's teeny tiny. As I said, emergency use only. I have to really crane my head to one side, really duck down, and if I scoot over here, you'll notice that with this second row seat slid all the way back, it's really impossible to put a human back here in the third row unless you were an amputee, because there's just nowhere for the legs to go. If I kick off my shoes, maybe I could do it for a while. The recline doesn't actually help back here as far as headroom either, because it means that your head goes back towards this opening and actually reduces the amount of headroom that is available. Headroom's pretty generous, as you can see over here in the second row headroom area. Back here though, really tight. No extra child seat anchors back here at all. We do have cup holders and places to dock the shoulder belts for when those seats are folded. We also have a lever over here to fold the seats flat from the cargo area. It's not meant for the third row passengers to escape. You use the lever on the back of the seat back there, but you can fold those second row seats flat. Some of you might think I'm giving the Outlander a hard time for having a third row. That's not the case, so let me be clear. I think this is one of the Outlander's best features. And in our Outlander plug-in hybrid, we indeed used the third row on a regular basis. Mainly for times where we were at the office and 6 or 7 people wanted to go to lunch, you could jam people in the back seat and take just one car. It really was very practical. Just keep in mind, you're going to have to put the shorter people back here, and no, not everybody is going to be the most comfortable, but you can scoot the second row seats forward and the front row seats forward and give the third row people enough legroom to survive back here. As you can see, it is definitely possible. You can recline that seat back. You could do this for 15 or 20 minutes, and that's exactly what this third row is for. Keep in mind though, we don't have any latch anchors back here for child seats, and indeed child seats in the third row would be pretty tricky. Even forward-facing or booster seats would be a little bit difficult just due to the general dimensions back here. It's definitely possible to have a kid in a booster seat back here that is tall enough for their head to be hitting the ceiling. And also, keep in mind those relatively small legroom figures there on your screen. Combined legroom is definitely on the small side for a 3-row SUV, but for a 2-row compact SUV, it's actually among the best at 81.6 inches combined between the front row and the second row. definitely more generous than we find in a RAV4. And that's really obvious with this front seat adjusted. For me, at 6 feet tall, I have maybe 8 or 9 inches of legroom behind, and certainly enough room to put some of those larger and bulkier rear-facing child seats, something that you cannot do in a RAV4 if I'm driving that RAV4. I also have this front seat comfortably adjusted for a 6'4" person. You could even put a rear-facing infant seat behind there. Now, the second row seats, they slide forward and backward, which is logical in order to give you that room for that third row in the back. And this center section folds down. This functions as a cargo pass-through, but it's also where we find the cup holders rather than having a separate little fold-down area there. One thing I also appreciate back here is that the center shoulder belt does not come out of the ceiling like we find in some of the competition. It comes out of the seat back. So if you wanted to put a child seat in the center of the rear bench, it's going to be a lot better centered. Although, in this position, this seat belt does actually interfere with the outboard buckle. Now let's talk child seats, because the roominess of the Outlander is definitely an advantage in this area. Even though this seat is comfortably adjusted for me and this has the easy access seat where it moves backwards when I turn the car off, there is still plenty of room back here for a rear-facing infant seat like this Quirky seat. As you can see, it's actually not touching the driver's seat even in this easy access position, but it would move about 1.5 inches, 2 inches further forward when the car is on. So plenty of room back here. Here's what it looks like when the driver's seat is not in that easy access position. So as you can see, quite a bit of room there between those seats. If you were a shorter driver, you could even move this second row seat further forward to allow the third row to have a little bit more room in the back, but you'd never be able to put this kind of child seat back there in the third row. On the latch anchor front, no plastic doors or flaps or Velcro or anything like that hiding the anchors. They're really easy to locate, easy to use, especially with the rigid style anchors that are on this particular base station here. One thing to keep in mind though, if you put a child seat in the center, obviously you're gonna have to use the shoulder belt here. As I said, that comes out of the seat back rather than out of the ceiling, which is something I prefer, but the seat belt location, you can see it comes out of kind of back there, I guess, under the outboard passenger's butt, and that means that that child seat would definitely interfere with the operation of the outboard seat belt buckle. So you're probably not going to be able to use that outboard seat behind the driver if you put a child seat in the middle, and the child seat is going to be pushed a little bit over there to the driver's side. But we have plenty of room in here, and we even have an almost flat floor in this area. If you were to use a base station shoulder belted into place with a load leg like this one has, this is the Quirky seat here, then you would still be able to use that load leg in this position because of the size and the flatness of that center hump. The exterior may be distinctively Mitsubishi, but the interior is decidedly Nissan, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Up here we have touch controls for the map lights, all LEDs there, sunglass holder over here, controls for the panoramic moonroof, big tall sun visors. I do appreciate the height of that, and they slide side to side. They also have vanity lights up there on the ceiling, LEDs yet again. Lots of grab handles all the way around for all 4 seating positions, and that big panoramic pane that goes just about to that second row passenger's torso area, not quite to the head. One of the nicest things that we get from the Nissan product line is the general design of the seats, which are really quite comfortable. They basically are Nissan zero-gravity seats. We have height-adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger, height-adjustable head restraints, and an attractive sort of, I guess you'd say, nutmeg-colored interior in this particular model, kind of a brown. We have two-way adjustable lumbar support for these seats. Only the driver's seat gets two-way adjustable lumbar support, but in this trim, the passenger seat is powered, although it doesn't have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. I give front seat comfort 8 out of 10 points, even though we don't have that extra option, because the general design of the seat itself is really quite comfortable, especially for longer trips. These seats are perforated and they are heated and ventilated. Moving over to the doors, we have some soft touch materials, that stitched material there on the doors. It appears to be an imitation leather product, but we also have lots of hard plastics around, for instance, that window switch area and the lower portion of the door, just as you'd expect. We also have a decent amount of shiny black plastic. One complaint I had about our Outlander was that the shiny black plastic definitely scratched pretty easily, and you would notice that as you're starting to clean the dashboard. But the dashboard design is about the same. It's been slightly tweaked. The biggest change is this big LCD in the middle. It is 12.3 inches, and it is now standard in every model. It's running the latest software from the Nissan portfolio, so it has CarPlay, Android Auto integration, factory navigation. I love the fact that CarPlay uses almost the entire screen, but it reserves this little left-hand sidebar for quick access to various system controls. I also appreciate the physical buttons below the screen for things like activating the camera system, track forward, backward, etc. This model also has the Yamaha audio system, which is something that Mitsubishi has been touting, and I do think it is one of the better audio systems in this segment. I definitely prefer it over the Bose system that we had previously. You can see those Yamaha logos up there on the tweeters, on the A-pillars, and of course, different speaker grills down there on the doors. This is not a standard audio system, it is optional, but I think this is now probably the benchmark in this segment as far as audio performance goes. Going below that, we have two big air vents there, the controls for the tri-zone automatic climate control that is optional. Dual zone is standard. We have a heated steering wheel here, ventilated and heated seats. Optional Qi wireless charging mat in this model. It does charge through thicker cases, which is nice. Two big cup holders there, the drive mode selector over here, kind of a joystick style shifter. You put your foot on the brake and that's the unlock button. You then pull back for drive. Park is that button on top. We have the electric parking brake there, auto brake hold, soft touch armrest with a reasonable amount of storage in this compartment. And then we have a USB-C charge only port. One thing I should mention when it comes to USB ports is that both of these inputs work for that system. So I do appreciate that dual port nature there. Keyless Go is standard in every model, but this big full color LCD instrument cluster is optional. You'll find it mainly in the mid-level trims and the top trims, and you'll find the head-up display on top, which is about a 10-inch head-up display. That's only going to be available in the very tippy-top trims of the Outlander. The steering wheel, that really hasn't changed. It's a pretty comfortable design. Paddles on the back for shifting the CVT. It is a CVT, not a regular automatic transmission. Volume up, down, track forward, backward over here. This rotary control controls that multifunction LCD. And then over here we have buttons for the active driving assist systems, but it does not come with the hands off the wheel system that we do find in the Rogue for 2025. The steering column manually tilts and telescopes with a reasonable range of motion, and then you'll find the memory setting switches for the front seat over there on the driver's door. If you're wondering what the key fob looks like, here it is, but now it's time to pop the hood. Nissan hasn't made any major changes under the hood for 2025, so the base engine is still this 2.5-liter four-cylinder from Nissan, still producing 181 horsepower, 181 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to a CVT, and you can choose all-wheel drive if you want, and the fuel economy toll is not big if you do that. It's 26 miles per gallon combined for this model, although we have been averaging over 30 mpg over a week of mixed driving. If you get the plug-in hybrid, it also has not changed. So 38 miles of range, 26 miles per gallon combined. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but you get 248 horsepower total, and you get a vehicle that drives like an electric car. And that's because basically it is an electric car. The Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid system, and it still uses that Mitsubishi engine, is for the most part a serial hybrid. So the engine is attached to a generator, and that is generating power for the twin electric motors front and rear. As with any design, there are pros and cons to this particular layout. The advantage is it drives like an EV. It has really nice acceleration, it's incredibly smooth, and it has that punch that people expect out of an electric car. The downside is fuel economy when it is operating as a hybrid, and we are going to dive into that a little bit in the drive section. One thing to know with the plug-in hybrid is that towing capacity does drop by 500 pounds, but 1,500 pounds of towing capacity is still pretty useful. And the other thing to keep in mind is that Mitsubishi has not updated the onboard charger, so it will still take about 6.5 hours to charge the battery at 240 volts. If you're thinking 181 horsepower is not a lot, well, it isn't, but a Kia Sorento that weighs a little bit more than this actually only produces 191 horsepower and the same torque figure as we have here. All right, let's see what those 181 horses can do. And they will do eventually 0 to 60 in 8.6 seconds. One pity with this CVT is that it's always going to imitate a stepped automatic transmission. Some people may appreciate that for the feel. It feels more normative. Of course, we have the shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel here as well, but it is going to mean it's going to take longer to get 0 to 60. If this just hung out there at a high RPM, it would actually go faster 0 to 60 than 8.6 seconds. It's worth noting that likely due to the power figures, 181 horsepower is certainly below a number of entries in this segment, and the added curb weight of the size of this and the third row in the back, it's going to take longer to go 0 to 60 than really most of the competition, certain options accepted, of course. On the other hand, if you get the plug-in hybrid version of this, then it's going to go really quick 0 to 60, actually more than 2 seconds faster 0 to 60, right around 6.5 seconds. That's pretty swift. not quite as fast, of course, as the RAV4 Prime, now relabeled the RAV4 plug-in hybrid. That is really, really quick, over 300 horsepower in that model, but still a very solid entry. Thanks to the wide tires we have on this one, 255 width, we get 115 feet in the stopping test from 60 miles an hour back to 0. That is definitely an excellent stopping distance. If you got the base model of the Outlander, obviously expect that to take a little bit longer. The wider tires logically also help out the handling, but the suspension is not tuned on the firmer side. It's definitely on the more comfortable side of the segment. So on this road, you'll notice we definitely get more tip and dive, more body roll than you'd get in something like a Sportage or even a Hyundai Tucson. Actually, even certain versions of the RAV4 are definitely going to feel a little bit tighter and more engaging on this road surface. But I think the mission of the Outlander was not necessarily to be the sportiest entry, but to be one of the more comfortable options. That makes sense if you especially have people back there in the third row. Now, Mitsubishi did say that they took the time to tweak the steering rack and tweak things here and there under the bodywork to try and tighten things up handling-wise, but you're not going to notice an enormous difference 2024 to 2025. The bigger difference is going to be between the hybrid and the non-hybrid version, well, plug-in hybrid and the non-hybrid version, because that plug-in hybrid is quite heavy. Just as you'd expect, anything with a big battery pack is going to get a lot of weight added to it, and that is definitely going to impact the handling scores. On this road surface, driving them back to back, you will notice you just can't push that plug-in hybrid nearly as hard. As with the handling ability, ride quality is pretty similar to the Nissan Rogue. Even though this model has the lowest profile tires available, it's still pretty comfortable out on a road surface like this, where we definitely have a lot of potholes, small and large imperfections. If I roll through these potholes right here, it actually handles that really nicely. It's not jarring in the cabin. The suspension doesn't become upset. And on road surfaces like that, the smaller Mazdas can get upset in the rear. Mitsubishi says they spent some extra time adding sound deadening to this model, and I think it definitely shows. It appears to be a little bit quieter, especially in the engine noise department versus the plug-in hybrid that we had. One thing worth noting, with the plug-in hybrid, the engine is just going to hang out at high RPMs quite frequently because of its design. It's primarily a serial hybrid, although it can engage a clutch at certain speeds and directly power the wheels mechanically. Most of the time, the engine is running a generator that's generating power, it's sending it to the electric motors or to the battery, and that's what's driving you forward. So the engine sounds and your foot on the accelerator pedal, they feel a little bit disconnected from one another. The downside to that design is also fuel economy. In this model, we've been averaging 30.3 miles per gallon. On the exact same test loop in a plug-in hybrid version with the battery not charged, we averaged right around 26 miles per gallon, basically what the EPA says it should get. Now, I know there has been a lot of debate about these scores and other outlets that have talked about fuel economy in the Outlander plug-in hybrid before, especially on Canadian channels, because this is quite popular in Canada. Well, the plug-in hybrid version of this is quite popular in Canada. And here I will say two things. The first one is, remember that the imperial gallon is larger than the US gallon. So if you're talking imperial gallons, that's obviously going to skew things. And the second thing is, this has been validated by independent testing agencies as a 26 miles per gallon hybrid, the plug-in hybrid version is. And Mitsubishi does not dispute that. In fact, I spent a lot of time with Mitsubishi engineers at one point back in the plug-in hybrid era when we owned that plug-in hybrid, and they all confirmed, nope, the numbers are correct. If you start with an empty battery and you do a standard fuel economy test loop, you should be right around 26 miles per gallon. Clearly, if you spend a lot of time driving at around 45 or 50 miles an hour, and this is perhaps where some of the Canadian numbers come in because speed limits are lower up there, then you will get closer to those 30 mpg numbers. But in mixed driving, especially when you're doing higher speed highway travel, just like a Honda hybrid system, because it has a very similar design, the fuel economy will definitely start to drop significantly due to the serial nature of this hybrid system. Does that make this a bad plug-in hybrid system? Absolutely not. It all depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a plug-in hybrid with solid winter performance, with nearly identical motors front and rear, that feels and drives like an EV, this is the only game in town, because you're going to get a very different driving experience in all of the other plug-in hybrid options that you could cross-shop against this. The most direct plug-in hybrid cross-shop against this model, bearing in mind that third row in the back, would be something like the Kia Sorento. The Sorento has a relatively small electric motor, a mechanical all-wheel drive system, and it's really going to depend on the engine for an awful lot. Of course, it's going to be more efficient in both modes than this, but that's the price you have to pay for the kind of driving style and the feel that we find in the Outlander plug-in hybrid. And if you don't have the opportunity to plug in, just don't get the hybrid version unless you want that better performance. Buy this one, you're going to get definitely better fuel economy, especially out on the open highway. The week after we filmed the first part of this video, Mitsubishi announced some pretty major changes for 2026. The biggest change is that the base engine is gone, and it's going to be replaced by a new 1.5-liter turbo engine. But this is not the variable compression 1.5-liter 3-cylinder from the Rogue. Instead, it's an in-house Mitsubishi design that's based on the 1.5-liter turbo in the Eclipse Cross. Hopefully, it's going to make a lot more power because the Eclipse Cross is not exactly peppy, but details on that are going to come later in 2025. Probably around October, November, we should know all of the details on the refreshed 2026 model. Interior and exterior, that's going to stay the same. The drivetrain is going to change, and it's not just going to be on the base model. The plug-in hybrid is getting some major updates as well, although, again, details a little bit sketchy. It's going to get the same interior and exterior refresh you saw in this video, but it's also going to get a revised hybrid system with much longer range, probably thanks to a new battery pack, although, again, details are sketchy. But what about the competition? Let's talk about that now, because competition is pretty tricky for the Outlander. It's priced, as you can see, right around the CR-V and RAV4, not too far off a Kia Sorento, but in truth, the Sorento's probably a closer competitor because the Outlander seats 7 in every version, and nothing else in its segment really does. There are really two ways to look at the Outlander, as a slightly larger and more pragmatic alternative to something like a RAV4 or CR-V, or as a less expensive and easier to park alternative to the average 3-row SUV, something like a Telluride or Pathfinder, something along those lines, admittedly, obviously with less room. But let's talk about the compact SUV competition first. The RAV4 is currently the best seller in America. It's getting some major changes for 2026, and we don't know pricing yet, and we haven't driven it yet, of course, so keep those details in mind. The big thing for 2026 for the RAV4 is that it's going all hybrid. Plug-in hybrid or regular hybrid, but no non-hybrid drivetrain is going to be available. I think that's exactly the right direction for Toyota to go in because that's the drivetrain I would have selected anyway. The downside is it doesn't really grow for 2026. So the cargo area is still really big, but the rear passenger area is still relatively small for the segment. Good luck fitting some of those larger rear-facing child seats behind a taller driver up front. It's just not going to happen in the RAV4, and it's definitely going to happen in the Outlander. Obviously, though, the big difference is there's no third row in the back, and that seems to be what a lot of Outlander shoppers are after, that emergency use third row. When we compare the Outlander to something like a CR-V, you can really see where the difference comes in terms of that third row and its effect on the interior packaging, because the CR-V is only a little bit smaller. It's only about an inch shorter in terms of overall dimension, and the height and width, they're pretty similar as well. The CR-V actually has a little bit more combined legroom in the first row and the second row, so those child seats are actually going to fit a little bit better in the back of the CR-V, but it doesn't have a third row. Now let's talk about the other 3-row option that is the closest competitor to this. That would be, of course, the Kia Sorento. The Sorento's always been kind of a weird option because it is small on the outside, bigger than you might imagine on the inside, but priced more like a CR-V or a RAV4. It's only $2,000 to $2,500 more expensive depending on options versus the Outlander, but you do get significantly more room on the inside, about 10 to 12 inches more legroom total, and significantly more cargo room as well. But it's bigger on the outside, so if you have a tight parking situation, it's not really going to be that helpful. On the other hand, we have an 8-speed automatic transmission. So if you're not a fan of CVTs, you can go that direction. If you like dual clutch transmissions, you can get one of those. At the $39,000 price point or above, you're going to end up with the 2.5-liter turbo producing 281 horsepower. Clearly that's going to be peppier, but it's not going to drive like the average regular automatic. People are not that big of a fan, seemingly, of that 2.5-liter turbo and DCT combo, which seems to be why Hyundai and Kia, it seems like they're going to be developing some new drivetrains using different transmissions in the future. Just know that the DCT is not going to feel right like a regular automatic. On the other hand, for about $40,000, you can get yourself into a hybrid Sorento, which is going to give you 35 to 40 miles per gallon, depending on exactly how you drive it, and a bit more power and pep than the base model. That's probably the direction I would go. And you can also get a plug-in hybrid Sorento, which I would probably also look at really closely. The big deal here, of course, is that the Sorento is a little bit nicer inside. I think it's more comfortable. I think the tech feels more modern, but it is going to be more expensive. And something worth noting, only the base engine, which is going to be pretty slow, has 7 seats. Every other version of the Sorento is a 3-row, 6-seat vehicle. That is a bit of a bummer. Also a bit of a bummer, it's a bit more wagon-like when you really look at some of the specifications. So the ground clearance is nearly 2 inches lower than some of the tall options in the compact SUV segment, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches lower than the Mitsubishi Outlander. So if you really need that extra clearance, you're not going to find it there in that. How about versus something like a Nissan Pathfinder? We'll just use that as a stand-in for an inexpensive, bigger 3-row vehicle, because the Pathfinder starts at $37,790. Well, that's $6,000 more than the Outlander. If you're only on occasion going to be using that 3rd row, and you don't really have cargo capacity needs beyond about 30 cubic feet or so, I would probably skip over something like the Pathfinder and just save some cash on the Outlander. Yes, the 3rd row is not going to be as practical, it's not going to be as usable, but it is going to be a whole lot less expensive. Less powerful, less fun to drive, less expensive though, so your mileage obviously will vary based on your exact needs. Let me know what you think about that down there, and are you sad that there are fewer 3-row small vehicles in the US than there have ever been before? Once upon a time, tons of options in this segment offered small 3rd rows, and now the swoopier styling in the back has really precluded that. Manufacturers are going for sportier looks, and of course they're really trying to push those customers into more expensive vehicles. For instance, the Highlander also honestly used to fill kind of a weird niche because it had that naturally aspirated base 4-cylinder engine, but now that engine option is gone, and a base Highlander will set you back nearly $42,000, so significantly more expensive than something like the Outlander, even though it's not exactly the biggest 3-row option out there, which is why they have the new Grand Highlander. Anyway, let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and of course, we'll see all of you next week.